Hey guys, it's Mr. Lee, and I have a little review that I want you guys to work through to get ready for your quiz, okay, on triangles. So I have a bunch of different problems that will kind of help you just review, and you should be able to do these problems by now, okay, because you've had plenty of practice. If you've done the homework, you've had plenty of practice, okay? So this first problem is just one that I kind of made up. So you have these two triangles right here, and you're given that triangle ACB is congruent to triangle PNK. Triangle ACB congruent to triangle PNK. So remember that order matters when you're either when you're making a congruent statement or when you're given a congruent statement between two polygons, the order matters. So how do you read this statement? Well, if you look at triangle ACB, it's right here, ACB. Well, PNK is not oriented the same way as triangle ACB. So those of you that are strong visual learners, you can see that all you have to do is rotate this triangle, okay, enough times so that it sits in the same orientation. But most of us are not able to do that. So what we do is we just look at the statement and we match up the letters. So A matches with what over here? Matches with P. C matches with what letter? N. B matches with what letter? K. So angle A matches with angle P. Okay, so let's go ahead and if you had this on paper, you can mark up the diagram, okay, which you won't have this on paper because your quiz will be on Edulastic. So what you want to do is while you're doing this, draw the diagram on paper, that way on your scratch paper, that way you can mark up your scratch paper. So let's match up angle A with which angle? Angle P, so one congruence mark. C, let's go ahead and put 2 marks, and that matches with N. 2 marks. And then B, angle B, 1, 2, 3 marks. That matches with K, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So let's also do the same thing for the 3 sides. So side AC, see how A and C are right next to each other? So side AC, we'll put 1 congruence mark there, and that matches with side PN, PN. Side CB, C to B, we'll put 2 congruence marks there. That matches with N to K. So N to K, 2. And so obviously side B to A matches with K to P. So B to A, K to P. Okay, and then we're given a bunch of measurements. Let's put a degree mark. That's degrees, that's degrees. Okay, so we're asked to fill out all these congruent statements. Well, what does angle A, what is it congruent to? Well, just look at your diagram. Angle A matches with angle P. You can also just look at this statement. A corresponds to P. Okay, what does B match with? B corresponds to K. And what does angle C match with? Angle C matches with angle N. Okay, so those are all your congruent statements for your angles. What about the sides? So AC, first and second letters, match with PN. So PN. So is that a correct statement? No. By now, you all know that that is incorrect because PN by itself is a number. Okay, and numbers are not congruent to something. We need to make this a shape. So it's side PN, or actually line segment PN. CB, C to B, that has 2 congruence marks. That matches with what? C to B matches with N to K. Is that the same as KN? No, because order matters. Okay. Then side AB going from A to B matches with P to K. So there's all your 6 congruent corresponding parts of the 2 triangles. Now we're asked for some lengths here and some measures here. What is the measure of angle A? Well, it's not given to us, but we are given that in this triangle you have 50 degrees and 60 degrees. So what would measure of angle A be? Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure it out. Okay. All right, so triangle sum theorem tells us that all 3 of these interior angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees. So angle A would measure 180 minus 60 plus 50, or 110. So that would be 70 degrees. Okay, just double check to make sure that all 3 of those add up to 180. So 50 plus 70 is 120, plus 60 is 180. So we're good. Measure of angle B, that's already given. That's 60 degrees. Measure of angle C, that's given. That's 50 degrees. Okay. Now, can we also find these, what these measures of angles are also? Yes, we can. Let's go ahead and write the 70 degrees in right there. So which angle matches with A? Well, P. So that means that that is 70 degrees. Which angle matches with C? N. Okay, so C was 50 degrees, so N is 50 degrees. Which angle matches with B? Angle K. Okay, so B is 60 degrees, so K is 60 degrees. And then finally, let's find all three of these sides. Okay, so side AC. So side AC that has one congruence mark, it's congruent to this side that has one congruence mark. So its length has to be equal to that length. So that is 4 inches. Don't forget your units. Okay, side CB. Okay, side C to B. C to B matches with N to K. Are we given N to K? We're not. Okay, so we don't know what that length is. Okay, side AB. A to B, that has 3 congruence marks, and that corresponds with A to B corresponds with P to K, which has 3 congruence marks, so that's 3 inches. Okay, so that's how you match up all the corresponding parts of congruent polygons. Okay, so that's one of the kinds of problems that you've done that you have to be able to do just by reasoning, just by matching. This is just a matching problem. Okay. Okay, next kind of problem is, and we've done this a couple different times now, we've classified triangles by its sides and by its angles. So what are the classifications of a triangle by its sides? Well, if a triangle has no sides congruent, then it's called scalene. If a triangle has 2 or more sides congruent, it's called isosceles. And most of the time when we're talking about isosceles, we're talking about exactly 2 congruent sides. And if all 3 sides are congruent, it is called equilateral. What about by its angles? I always just start with a 90-degree angle. So if a triangle has one 90-degree angle in it, it's called a right triangle. Okay. If it has an obtuse angle, it's called an obtuse triangle. If all 3 angles are acute, it's called an acute triangle. Then the only other one is when all 3 angles are equal or congruent, equiangular. Notice that equiangular triangles are also equilateral, right? We connected those a couple different times that we've lectured on this. Okay, so that is classifying triangles. Next type of problem we need to know is the exterior angle theorem. And the exterior angle theorem basically tells us that when you have an exterior angle of a triangle, its measure is just equal to the sum of the opposite 2 angles. And we talked in the lecture about why that is, because these 2 are supplementary because they're a linear pair, and this plus these 2 add up to 180. So obviously substituting this is equal to these 2. Okay, so solve for x. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can solve for x. Okay, to solve for x, we know that the measure of this exterior angle, 5x plus 20, is equal to the sum of the 2 opposite angles, so 25 plus x. So now you just go ahead and solve this, right? So now we have 4x's over here, and then what do we have over here? 25 minus 20 is equal to 5, I believe. So x is equal to 5/4, okay? And this just said solve for x, so we're just done now. Okay, if it says go back and plug this in, okay, we would plug it in, but we're not going to be plugging that in. Okay, so now the next type of problem is solving isosceles and equilateral triangles. Okay, so here we have a triangle, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3 congruence marks, so all 3 sides are congruent. So this triangle is both equilateral, and also we know that all equilateral triangles are also equiangular. And we know that each angle measures 60 degrees. So this is a 60, 60, 60 degree triangle. Okay, so we know that all 3 of these are going to be 60 degrees. because equilateral triangles are always equiangular, and equiangular triangles always have each one of their interior angles measure 60 degrees. It also asks you to solve for x. Okay, how are you going to solve for x? Well, we have 3 different measurements that have x in it. We don't need to actually use all 3 of these. What we could do is just say that this is equal to that, or this is equal to that, or this is equal to that. Doesn't matter. You can just use 2 of them, then just go ahead and solve for x. Okay. Now we have an isosceles triangle, okay, and we're asked a couple different things. What is the length of xy? Okay, well, xy, these two sides are congruent. So if this side measures 5 inches, the length of that side is 5 inches, this must also be 5 inches because those sides are congruent. So xy is equal to 5 inches. What is the measure of angle z and the measure of angle y? Well, the measure of angle x is given to us as 65 degrees. And remember, when you have an isosceles triangle, these two angles are congruent because the two angles that are sitting on the bases, the two angles that are sitting on the congruent sides, are also congruent. So we know that this is also 65 degrees, right? So the measure of angle z is also 65 degrees. Well, how are you going to get the measure of angle y? Is that also 65? No, it's not. Okay, think about that and see if you can figure it out. Okay, so hopefully you thought about the triangle sum theorem, which tells us that the sum of the measures of 3 interior angles of any triangle add up to 180. So this is just going to be 180 minus the sum 65 plus 65. So 65 plus 65 is 130. So 180 minus 130 is 50 degrees. Okay. So now let's go ahead and look at a few more isosceles triangles. Okay. So here's another isosceles triangle. And in this case, instead of like here, we were given that the sides are congruent, so we knew the angles, the base angles are congruent. Here we're given that these two angles are congruent. So now we know that these two sides are congruent because these two angles are congruent. Okay. So how do we solve for x? Pause the video and see if you can set that up and solve. Okay, so since these two sides are congruent and this length is 15x plus 3, that length is x plus 12, we just set those two expressions equal to each other. And then what do we get? We get 14x on this side. We get 9 over here. X is equal to 9/14. And we're done because it just says solve for x. Okay. This problem also says solve for x. Okay. This has an angle congruent, an angle congruent, an angle congruent. So we know that this is equiangular. It's a 60-60-60 triangle. Okay, we know that equiangular triangles are also equilateral. So congruent, congruent, congruent. So now we're asked to solve for x. So we can just simply set up this equation. 5x plus 1 equals 16. So 5x equals 15. So x equals 3. And it just says solve for x, so we're done. Finally, I want you guys to review your triangle congruence theorems. Okay, your triangle congruence theorems. Okay, so what are the triangle congruence theorems? It is the 5 shortcuts that we learned. Let's just write what they are. And I would suggest that you write this. Well, you have this in your notes already. So turn in your notes to your triangle congruence theorems notes. And what are the 5 congruence theorems? There's SSS, SAS, AAS, ASA, and HL, hypotenuse leg, right? So which one is this? Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure out all of these, okay? And then check your answers. Okay, so hopefully you figured out all 5 of those. So with this one, well, we only are given 2 things and we need 3 things, right? Well, is there a shared or common side? No, I don't see any shared or common sides. Do we have vertical angles anywhere or parallel lines? I don't see parallel lines, but I do see vertical angles. Do you see them? Go ahead and mark them. That's right, there they are. There's your verticals. So now we have an angle, a side, and an angle. So that is ASA. In part B, we also only have 2 things. We have a side congruent to this side and this side congruent to this corresponding side. Are there any shared or common sides? Yes, this is a shared or common side. So let's go ahead and mark that. and you can see we have side, side, side. How about this one? We have a 90 degree, we have a 90 degree, we have right angles. So the only theorem that only works for, I'm sorry, all 5 of these theorems work for right triangles also, but one of these you can only use if you have right triangles, that's HL. So let's check for HL first. Do we have a hypotenuse and a leg congruent? Well, here's the right angle. So we know the hypotenuse is the side opposite. So yep, that's congruent. And then one of the legs is congruent. So that's HL. How about part D? Okay, we only have 2 things. Do we have a shared or common side? We do, right there. Okay, so what do we have? We have a side, then an angle, then a side. And then finally part E. Any shared or common sides? Nope. Any parallel lines? Nope. Any vertical angles? Yep. So what is this? AAS. Okay, guys, hope you were successful in your review. If you had any problems on any of these review problems, you know where to go in your notes. And if you don't have these in your notes, just look in the chapter resources where I posted the notes that I took in class and the examples. So good luck on your quiz, and I will see you next time.